So we will now have the next plenary session with Mr. T.M. Krishna, Carnatic vocalist. We request Mr. Ravi Sam to welcome him.
Gayati Vanamali Gayati Vanamali Madhuram 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 Gayati Vanamali Madhuram.
Good afternoon, and first of all let me thank CII and Ravi Sam for inviting me over here. For about quite some time in my life, I get on the stage every other day, and I'm in front of an audience like this, and it looks like Ravi had a plan for today to place me after Professor Prema Pandurang and say, you know, if you thought you were so confident about getting on stage, just get on stage after she finishes. Then you know what's going to happen. So I'm here. I was wondering what to talk about, and thankfully I got an email from Ravi Sam to tell me what I should talk about. So I'll try and stick to that. All of us as musicians, dancers, painters, whoever, are considered the cultural ambassadors of this country, in specific reference to India, of course. So before I even talk about Carnatic music and what I do, I think I'll start from looking at culture itself, because somehow we are branded as these ambassadors of this culture, as if we own it and it's something that only we give people, and that's total nonsense and rubbish. So I'd like to start like that, and I know it's getting to the afternoon and everybody's getting tired, but I would really like some participation if that's okay, and I'd like you to just contribute, I'm sorry for using the word answer, but contribute to this conversation. How would one define this elusive word culture? Anybody, please. Ranveer, you're not allowed to answer. Anybody. What does it mean to you? What is the adjective that comes to your head if I say culture? What? Beg your pardon? Thought process, okay. Anybody else? Way of life. Wow, we love that word in India, isn't it? Hinduism a way of life, culture is a way of life, you're all a way of life. Another one. Anything else? It's history. Anything else? It's the values, what we carry. I guess it's after all going to be a combination of all this. But if you actually look at culture, it's what every individual is. Culture is what everyone is. The way you eat is culture, what you wear is culture, the way you respond is culture. The way you would handle a situation is also culture. And culture comes with a lot of conditioning along with it. And so culture and conditioning probably go hand in hand. I am conditioned to feel like praying if I go to a temple. I am conditioned to remove my slippers before I get on stage if I was going to sing. Now, I'm not passing value judgment on this at all. I'm just stating a fact. So, culture is in many ways what every one of us are. So, in no way are we artists possessors of this culture. Not at all. I think first we have to forget that, because only if we remember that we are all culture, we are all artists, we all own this, we're going to think we are doing a service to art. Nobody is doing a service to art, nobody is helping art. Art is in every individual. Art is art, and painting and dance and music is after all just a manifestation of this culture that every one of us have. The songs were born out of situations, emotions that every one of us experience. The dance, the dance and the choreography is all manifestations of what everyone experiences. So it's not in any way alienated from what everyone is. That's what I want to start by saying. Now, as an artist, as a musician, I just think I have the capacity to express what we as a society, as a community feel. I have that vehicle that allows me to express that, and that's what maybe makes a small difference between you and I. But that's not a very big deal. I mean, you do it in some other fashion. So I think we should start from the point by saying culture is every one of us, and music, dance, everything is in every one of us, is part of everyone's being. And only from there I think we can have this conversation of music or dance or anything else. Now, another very important part of culture, in the Indian context especially, is religion. And we can't but ignore religion as being a very important context. And I'll deal with that again when I come back. Now, if you look at music, we look at classical arts and we look at folk arts. And I don't know how we define the two, and if somebody can help me, it really help the conversation. How would you define a classical music or a classical dance vis-a-vis folk music, kuthu, whatever? How do you look at both? Anybody? Which is more refined? Classical is more refined. Anybody else? You disagree with that? You are nodding. You don't agree with her. Okay. Any other? Which classical is formal and folk is informal. Okay. Anything else? Which one? I wish. But anyway, anything else? So how do you define classical? So can I just say that there is a structure? Can I use that word? Okay, you think that there is a structure in the classical form. You think that the folk and the classical form are the same, so both have structures. Structure and a lack of, rather not a lack, but a less amount of structure. Okay, anything else? Beg your pardon?
Watching.
Okay.
Classical is what you are really interested in watching. Folk is what you intend to participate in.
Have you tried doing kuthu dance ever?
I have tried to do Badiga dance.
Ah, okay. I'll take you on this and maybe get you on stage with some kuthu artists someday.
Absolutely. I'm for it. Yes.
Anybody else? Can you speak louder? Sorry, you don't have a mic.
Rather than the classical.
Yeah, but how do you differentiate the two? That's the battle. It's very interesting. As a Carnatic musician, I have been told that my form is one of the most, Carnatic musicians think it's the most sophisticated, so I'll stick to that. We perform the most sophisticated, classy art form, musical form in this world. And every other form is found in this form. So we are geniuses basically. And folk music or folk art is after all community exercise. It's about the community. The community dances together. Okay, there's Pongal, they dance together. Okay, there is some other event, they dance together. So there is a certain amount of a frivolous attitude among the classical brands towards folk art. But if you actually look at it, I don't think they're very different at all. The folk arts are as complicated, as structured, and as difficult to master as the classical arts. In our conditioning of what we think is sophisticated and modern, and maybe urban is also a word we should use here, and even probably a little Western in terms of our aesthetic understanding, we consider the folk arts little less in the grade. We are all conditioned to look at it that way. But when I speak to a kuthu artist, he says there are 67 adavas, sir, which I learned. And I can't figure out one adava from the other adava when he does it. Okay? And so, also there is a social angle to how we look at classical arts. Classical arts by nature, anyway, seem to deal with middle, upper middle, and elitist to a certain extent. Vis-a-vis, folk arts remain probably in the lower strata of economic society. Yeah, I was going to come to that at some point of time. The caste system, that's far more complicated. So, no. See, there is a caste layering over there. I don't want to get to that because that will take about 45 minutes to even put my feet into it. And there's a lot of sludge over there. So I'll be very careful before I do that. But yes, all these layers play a role. And to me, as a musician, I think the simple way of describing the difference between the two for a perceiver is when you look at a classical art form, the structure comes in front of you first, and the art comes from inside the structure. When you look at the folk form, the form comes and hits you first, but the structure is very well hidden. So as in an art form, the structure starts coming up into the front side of the art form, it seems to turn itself into a classical art form. Because probably then we start putting rules, I'm saying all of us start putting rules that unless you understand the structure, you're not going to comprehend the art form. This problem is not there in the folk forms because they look at it as what they see. Now, we'll stop right there. So now I perform Carnatic music. I have been performing from when I was 12 years old. I don't come from a Bhagavatar family or a family of musicians. I come from a business family, but I know nothing about business. And I'm a first generation musician, so to speak. Yes, my mother sings, there's been interest, but I'm a first generation musician. Now, in the 80s, there was this great fear, and legitimately so, that Carnatic music is going to die. And there are no takers to this art form among the younger generation. It's all going to collapse. And a bunch of about 6 young guys, then just out of college, decided that they would do something about it. And they were all talented young musicians, some not musicians, just volunteers, and said, if nobody is going to give us opportunities to perform and give us a platform, and everybody cribs there are no young talent, we will create an organization where only people below the age of 30 can perform. Which kind of excluded everybody who was professionally performing at that point of time because everybody is above 65. Now, all of us who are today professional performers are a product of this movement called YACM, Youth Association for Classical Music, started in 1985. And a lot of what I do is, of course, because of the seeds that were sown through my own engagement with that organization through many years. And I have to place that on record before I say anything else. Now, one of the biggest challenges as a classical musician, especially in concern with the youth, especially, the first and the foremost difficult challenge is religiosity as a Carnatic musician. Every word, 99% of the word that I sing in my art form is about Rama, Krishna, Parvati, Vinayaka, Muruga, everybody. Okay? Tell me one 14-year-old who really worries about all this at that point of time. Okay? So how do I communicate this art form to a generation of young people who don't have that connect that the senior citizens, with all apologies to those who are here, have through their own experiences, their own conditioned understanding of God and religion, blah, 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 blah. This was the biggest challenge, and it is even now considered pretty blasphemous to try and break the bhakti link, if I may say, between music and its content. So when this began, it was a challenge, and what first thing we said is, we are not going to talk about religion. We are not going to talk about Rama. Rama is your personal experience. Krishna is your personal experience. If you find it religious, you find it spiritual, go ahead, have fun. But it doesn't mean that the music can be enjoyed only if I have that experience of Rama, Krishna, Devi, whoever. Okay? So the first thing we did was we broke that. We said, we're not saying it's not there. We're not talking about it, that's all. We just will not talk about it. So we only spoke about the musical form. The second biggest problem is you had a generation of listeners who would tell all the young people that all other forms of music are bad, and the only form of music that you should listen to is Carnatic music. It's God's gift to mankind. Now, again, 15-year-old listening to this from his dad or mother is going to say, that's the last thing I'm going to do in my life. And that's exactly what was happening for a long time. That's something we did. We said, Carnatic music is an art form just like jazz, rock and roll. You can listen to Michael Jackson one day, you can listen to Shemmagudi Srinivasayar the next day. There's no difference between Michael Jackson and Shemmagudi Srinivasayar according to me. They are both artists, both masters in their field. So that perception had to be changed. I'm not saying we're all successful, but that was another seed that we threw in. And the whole concept of classical forms being complicated, difficult to comprehend. I think as South Indians, we love to really appreciate our intellectual capabilities. We are extremely arrogant about it. There's no doubt about it. We think everybody on the other side of the Vindhyas are very good at marketing, can talk very well and sell things. But you know the brains, it's in the south. So, since we believe that, we like to complicate even the simplest thing. What are the 7 notes? Sarigama. No. You can't understand the 7 notes unless you understand the significance of how the 7 notes were first born. Who cares? I asked you what the 7 notes were. No, I can't tell you. It's simple way of making something simple complicated. And we still do it. So, other thing we did is, look, we are only sowing seeds. So if somebody is going to make the journey of understanding more, they're going to make the journey. Let them make the journey. But my job is to just tell them, this exists. This exists. This is what we're doing. You come to a concept, this is what is happening. Then what happens is their own development and growth. So that is how my engagement with the youth actually started. And I know it sounds ridiculous for me to use the word youth because I don't consider myself too old, but I think now generation gaps are every 3 years. Considering that, I think I'm graying very, very fast. But so the biggest question that's been asked to me by a lot of people is, your core competency is to perform. Why don't you just do that and shut up? What's your big deal of saying, I'm going to do this, I'm going to be organizing that? You're doing this because you want to be in the newspapers every other day. Well, it is good to be in the newspapers every other day. I'm not saying no. But that's a question that a lot of people ask me, and a lot of businessmen ask me too. Why are you coming and talking to me about this? Your job is to sing. Do that. I totally disagree. I think in the world we live in a world where, to be very honest, performing is the most selfish thing I can do in my life. Absolutely honest, the most selfish thing I can do in my life. I'm going to perform. I believe I have the capability to please you guys sitting in this room. And as long as I have that, I'm going to make money. And as long as I can do that, I'm going to have a comfortable life. And then I'm going to retire and then get all the awards, hopefully, and then and then die at some point of time. That's pathetic. That's absolutely pathetic. And I think all musicians or artists who think that way need to really think about the future. Because it's not about me, it's not about my generation, it's about what is happening today that will change, not tomorrow, but day after. That's how all my engagements began. And it just started one after another. I'll just go through a few of them, and what's happening with it, I'll just try and talk to you about it. The engagement of the youth is a continuous process. It never ends. We have done, in only Chennai, we have done what we call LECONs, lecture concerts, through YACM, and even later to more than 150 schools. And 70% of the schools were corporation schools. They were not schools that are naturally in some way exposed to these art forms. And the most astounding thing for me, learning from there, was every child in that room was willing to learn about Carnatic music. No amount of the social differentiation that exists between me and that student there ever stopped that student from being excited, interested, and asking me the most difficult questions. The problem is us. The problem is we don't care about engaging with them. We are very, very happy performing to all of you. So that is the first big lesson, and that's how continuously we've gone to a lot of schools, talked, and some of the schools like a continuous engagement process, which is also happening. But I still think it's only a small, very, very small portion of what can be done. A colleague of mine, very famous singer Bombay Jayashree, and I worked together in many projects, and I have to tell you about two of them. Firstly, since we're talking about youth, the another aspect of the whole performing arts that we found lacking in some way in terms of the whole setup is younger musicians or younger talented musicians who are studying in many of these institutions, Kalakshetra, Government Music College, don't really have an access to the great musicians or the great dancers. Don't get a chance to talk to them. Don't get a chance to ask questions to them. And so we said we will start a festival called Swanubhava, where the festival is only for students of music and dance. No public was invited. The ad was said, public do not come. And we probably had 2-3 people who came, we couldn't throw them out, but otherwise we had every day close to 900 students. We've done this for 3 years. 900 students of music and dance coming there and listening and asking questions, making artists feel extremely uncomfortable. But every artist contributed. Every artist was free to answer the questions. They answered the questions. And the learnings that these people take from there is immense. It's not whether they become great musicians tomorrow. They can be musicians, they can be curators, they can be sound engineers, they can be backstage people, they can be authors, they can be journalists, they can be critics. Not that I like the last word very much, but anyway. But they can be all that. And it's, I think, fabulous that we saw 900 students every day. And what we also did as we developed the festival is we felt that we are too caught up in our own form. I'm completely caught up with Carnatic music. 24/7, only thing happening in my life is Carnatic music. Where is my engagement with any other art form? Where is the enrichment from another art form? And that's even worse at the student level. So we changed the festival by the 3rd year and said what we will do is we will bring folk artists, we will bring theatre, we will bring cinema, we will bring, of course, Hindustani music, we will bring other forms of dance. So last year we had, on the same festival, S.P. Balasubramanian having a chat with Rajiv Menon. In the same festival, we had Kuthu. In the same festival, we had a Carnatic musician performing. In the same festival, we had N. Rajam performing Hindustani. We had Alarmel Valli, we had Madhvi Mudgal. So that way it gives every student an understanding or at least a perception of another art form. So this is one of the ways that we've been trying to engage with younger, talented people. Another product, how many minutes do I have? Huh? Okay. You'll tell us? Okay. Good. Another thing we did is, when Jayashree and I got together and started our organization called Matrika, we had this crazy idea. We started the organization just for a book. It's kind of crazy. See, if you go to any hotel in India, you go to any corporate house lobby in India, you will find a book on jewelry of India. You will find a book on all the sculptures of India. And all these foreigners sitting there will of course look and say, wow, India is so beautiful. And India is beautiful. And then you will have something about Kanjivaram saris. Am I missing anything here? You guys can contribute. There will be nothing. Huh? Furniture. There will be nothing about the musicians. There will be nothing about the painters. There will be nothing about the people who did all those beautiful things that we love to flaunt. And that really, really pissed us off. Okay? And we said, everybody has to know who Shammugudi Srinivasa is. Everybody has to know who is Palgat Maniyar, who is T.N. Rajaratnam Pillai. Who are these people? These are the people who have done music because of whom I'm standing here and talking like I own the world. It's because of them. And this is not a statement of fake humility, but it's a fact. So we wrote a book called Voices Within, and we look for a publisher. So we had a very famous publisher in India saying, yeah, I can do this for you, but I'll make it like this size, and we'll have 4 pages in between with ugly, the color kind of things they put in between 4 pages, and then you can have all your matter. But you have to write 400 pages. So we almost signed the contract. The day before, we just called each other and said, you know what, we're not going to sign the contract. This is not how we want the book. We want this book visually, aesthetically, and lyrically really celebrating the music that we are talking about. So that project was shelved for 3 years because we didn't have the money. And finally one day we said, okay, we'll find the money. And I must say we found the money. And we published probably then the first coffee table book on Carnatic music ever. And I'm not belittling the word coffee table at all. I think it has a very important place in literature, from that extent of having intellectual books to the other extreme of having something that you just look at and say, wow. And that's how, and that book actually came up. Anyway, I'll go to the next part. So we published this book. It did well. It's still doing pretty well. And from there came another engagement for me, totally by accident. And this engagement was for people like you. A good friend of mine from Bombay, who's an innovation coach, called me one day and said, where can I buy a book? I said, just go to any store, you'll get it, go buy it. So he buys the book. He calls me from the airport after 4 hours and said, you know what, I'm coming to Chennai next week and we have to have a meeting. So I said, but what? He said, everything you've written in that book. The book is not a biography, but it's more of the spirit of every artist. What is it that drove them? What is it that made them who they are? What did they do? And he said, you know, everything you've written there is what we've been crapping about in all these management things all these years. And it's astounding for me that these musicians have done all that all by themselves without even thinking about the jargons, thinking about, all that you talk about. I don't talk about, you talk about. But anyway, so we actually came up with a business creativity workshop based on 7 Carnatic musicians. And first I was extremely skeptical, I have to say. Though in my mind, I guess the genes of having entrepreneurship in my family probably had a tick somewhere. And it told me, I always looked at these musicians as entrepreneurs of some sorts, because they went to places that you wouldn't imagine. They really, really took risks that I wouldn't take. But when he came and said, can we do this? I said, I don't want this to turn out to be another mumbo jumbo where we're just fleecing somebody and making money and walking away. And it took good 6 months, and we actually came up, we picked out of these musicians tools, methods that they use that can be actually transferred to a business context about innovation, creativity, basically as a trigger to change the way every one of us are used to thinking. And that's how that was born. And the most pleasurable part of that exercise is that you go to Bombay, you have 200 people sitting in the room, and every one of them gets this book, and then you have some D'Souza or Kirloskar coming to you and saying, I never knew there was somebody like Samangudi. And I think that was definitely, to me, something special. That somebody who would never walk into a sabha, into a kacheri, now knows something about a T.R. Mahalingam. And he knows it through a language, or he or she understands. That's the language of business. So that was the other engagement. So you have youth, you have corporates. Then, I think another very important part of where we are today is preserving, archiving, and preserving what we have. And in terms of music, we have tons of recordings. Everybody in the 50s and 60s and 70s, especially 60s and 70s, I guess, did a lot of private recordings of musicians at their house or at concerts, and most of them are kept in such pathetic conditions. Very, very horribly kept. So one of the other organizations I am involved with is called Sampradaya, which is an archival institute. We have a long way to go to becoming a professional archival institute. But I think it's very important that we preserve what we have, just like you preserve your temples, or you try to preserve your temples and your buildings. I think audio archival and video archival have to be preserved, have to have a reference point. We have to know where we are from. And that's another activity I'm very passionate about. Now, for all the atheistic flavor that I gave in the first 10 minutes of my conversation with you, another project I'm very involved in involves temples. And it's an organization that is called Kalachara Marumalarchi. The inspiration for this came from my trips to Kerala. I've performed numerous concerts in Kerala, and at one point of time during their Utsava period, or they say Ulsava period, I used to sing between, in a month, 30 days, I used to sing about 20 concerts in Kerala only. And each concert beginning at 10 p.m. and finishing at 3 a.m. 3 a.m. And what is this about these temple fair concerts that appeal to me? First thing that really shocked me was, that's a communist state. What do they care about music? That is the first thing. And I can tell you there'll be no temple festival in Kerala even today without a Kathakali performance, a Bharatanatyam performance, a Carnatic concert, and something called Ganamela. And Ganamela is not full music. Ganamela is a light music form which is not a full music form. So they talk about nature, they talk about love, they talk about various things. All these events happen in every temple festival in Kerala, even today. Within 5 months, they've had something like 800, 900 performances. And each of them is 3 hours, 4 hours. And when I saw it, and I saw the crowds, once when I sang in Etumanur, there were 20,000 people for a concert. I've never seen that audience ever in my life. And I can tell you, they went across religious lines, caste lines. And that's what appealed to me the most. And I have to tell you one incident that happened. One of my early trips to Kerala, and I was sitting there, pompous urban guy that I am. I was sitting on stage, and there was this guy, sloshed. It was about 12, midnight. He was absolutely drunk, and he had a beedi in his hand. He had a dirty lungi on, and a torn shirt on. He sat in front of me, smoking, glaring at me. I thought, oh my goodness, this guy's going to create a ruckus. And I also had decided, who the hell allowed him in here? Who the hell allowed him to sit there? Nobody bothered about it. So after about 20 minutes, took his hand and said, Sami, Kambodi padanga Sami, Kambodi padanga. Kambodi is a raga in Carnatic music. In my wildest dreams, I would never imagine those words coming out of his mouth. And it was almost like a reality check for me. And almost like put me in place on how I judge people. And after I finished the Alapana, he came and gave me 10 rupees. He placed 10 rupees in front of me. And he walked away. Now, I think that was the biggest trigger for me. This is dead in Tamil Nadu. This is dead. There are no temple festivals. My point of having temple music festival is the aesthetic, the sound of music has to be heard by children from a very young age. It's not a question of whether they comprehend it or not. It's a question of just sensitizing them to that. And that's what temple concerts and dance performance did in Tamil Nadu for many years. You go, anybody on the road could hear the Nadaswaram, could hear the tabal, could hear the concert. This happens in Kerala. Everybody, if Chanda starts playing, everybody knows what's happening. I have no clue what that guy is doing. Then they tell me it's a pyramid structure. I've still not understood that structure. Everybody knows what's going. Why? Because every year he hears it or she hears it. So the inspiration was there, and we are still trying to do the same in Tamil Nadu. We have done festivals. I have to thank Ravi also. He's as much part of this movement as anybody else. We have also Mr. Ashok Joshi here. Through some of the places we are conducting festivals there also. So we've done in Padavide, we've done in Tirukkurangudi, we've done it in Tanjavur, we've done it in Tiruchendur, we've done it in Kanchipuram. The whole idea is that we need to get art back into the temple, get music, dance back into the temple, get more people to hear it. You never know what's going to happen tomorrow. So that's how that engagement. I'll say. Finally, before I finish, you can just go on saying, I just like to say two, three things and finish. There is a desperate need for things to change even in the performance arena as a performer. I think it's a very weird thing if I tell you this. Every other art form, the lyrical content of every other art form has changed to the times that they are in. You take visual art, the mediums have changed. You take dance, there's a lot happening. You take Carnatic music, zero. I'm not saying anything wrong about the great composers of the past. I think they're probably the greatest we could have had. but there has to be content that is contextual to where I live in and where I am. I live in 2011. Doesn't mean I'm going to sing about a computer, but it has to have some relevance. I think this is something we have to explore. I have tried in my own way to challenge some of these things. I'll finish by just saying one thing. All these things I said are just ways of contributing to this whole sphere, okay, other than being a performer. And it's like an ecosystem. It's like an ecosystem that we need to treasure and contribute in whatever fashion we want. And one thing I want to say is that art is an extension of every individual in this room. I have a problem with this giving back word. It's condescending in my opinion. I think it's not a question of giving back. You're actually helping yourself. And one of the most beautiful things about art is about emotions, it's about the people, it's about expression, and it's about creativity. And if you don't think it's important, then you're killing every individual who's going to work in your company. Every individual who's going to contribute to your net profit is not going to be an individual. He has to be happy, he has to be emotionally satisfied, and he has to have the sensitivity. And the greatest thing of art is it gives you sensitivity automatically. It hits you on your face and slowly you start appreciating it. So it's but a fact that it is part of us. And it's a but of fact that it's not about supporting art, it is about feeling art. It's about being and recognizing that you are an artist. Every individual in this room is an artist by themselves. And unless we have that ownership of art, it is not about sponsoring a festival that can have a banner over there. It is not about that. Or it is not about some individuals who have a personal interest in art. It cannot work that way. That's the only two ways it's working today. Either you have individuals who love the art form who are contributing, or you have corporate houses who want their banners. It can't be that way. It should be a recognition that art belongs to every one of us. And unless that happens, we are only going to do work in spurts, in small ways. It's going to disappear. And then again we'll have this whole confusion of where we are. So my only request to all of you here is, if you want to create happiness, if you want to create better human beings of ourselves, let's just recognize that we are the art and not the musicians and dancers and the ones that appear in the paper. Thank you very much. Can I take a few questions? Can I take a few questions if there are any? I said question. Huh?
The floor is now open to questions. Due to the time constraint, we'll restrict the number of questions to 2.
Are there any questions by any chance? You have a question?
Is there any folk which has over a period has developed into a classical art with a different name?
Yeah, of course. I mean, first of all, Carnatic music itself, to take it as we see it, is about 300 years old actually. And there are a lot of folk elements in Carnatic music that has come into it. So, actually I am as Maharashtrian as I am Tamil in a way, you know that? Because the Carnatic music that I sing has a lot of Maharashtrian elements in it. I am as Maharashtrian, I am as Malayali, I am as Kannadiga as anything. So, there are a lot of folk elements that have come in. In fact, the Carnatic music we talk about today was originally considered a folk form. I am talking about 1,000 years past. I won't go into the complexity of it. But the fact is, it was born out of what was then considered folk and not classical. So, I'm as much a folk artist, I guess, in a way. Okay. Now I'll just finish with my conditioned response.
ಮಾತರಂ ವಂದೇ ಮಾತರಂ ವಂದೇ ಮಾತರಂ ಸುಜಲಾಂ ಸುಫಲಾಂ ಮಲಯಜ ಶೀತಳಾಂ ಸಸ್ಯ ಶ್ಯಾಮಳಾಂ ಮಾತರಂ ವಂದೇ ಮಾತರಂ ಸುಜಲಾಂ ಸುಫಲಾಂ ಮಲಯಜ ಶೀತಳಾಂ ಸಸ್ಯ ಶ್ಯಾಮಳಾಂ ಮಾತರಂ ವಂದೇ ಮಾತರಂ ಶುಭ್ರಜ್ಯೋತ್ಸ್ನಾ ಪುಲಕಿತಯಾಮಿನಿ ಪುಲ್ಲಕುಸುಮಿತ ಧ್ರುಮದಳ ಶೋಭಿನಿ ಶುಭ್ರಜ್ಯೋತ್ಸ್ನಾ ಪುಲಕಿತಯಾಮಿನಿ ಪುಲ್ಲಕುಸುಮಿತ ಧ್ರುಮದಳ ಶೋಭಿನಿ ಸುವಾಸಿನಿ ಸುಮಧುರ ಭಾಷಿಣಿ ಸುವಾಸಿನಿ ಸುಮಧುರ ಭಾಷಿಣಿ ಸುಖದಾಂ ವರದಾಂ ಮಾತರಂ ವಂದೇ ಮಾತರಂ ಸುವಾಸಿನಿ ಸುಮಧುರ ಭಾಷಿಣಿ ಸುಖದಾಂ ವರದಾಂ ಮಾತರಂ ವಂದೇ ಮಾತರಂ ಸುಜಲಾಂ ಸುಫಲಾಂ ಮಲಯಜ ಶೀತಳಾಂ ಸಸ್ಯ ಶ್ಯಾಮಳಾಂ ಮಾತರಂ ವಂದೇ ಮಾತರಂ ವಂದೇ ಮಾತರಂ ವಂದೇ ಮಾತರಂ